This is a secret weapon in the high ticket sales space, language mastery for sales, specifically meta model. Why every single sale is either won or lost in language. Make sure to subscribe if you are wanting to watch the series and become elite. Now, jumping into it, the logic behind meta model. Starting off, every pattern is a place where a meaning got deleted, distorted, or generalized, which means that created and reinforced a belief, which then in turn makes you act. Sales is making sure that their beliefs align with the version of them that they need to be, so that they act in accordance with the version of the person that does the sale and gets the result. Now, with that being said, if you finish a sales call without alignment from your prospect with who they need to be, you can't expect them to close at a higher rate. So that is exactly why this training will be a game changer for your calls. So keep watching if you value personally being a mentally sharp sales rep with a complete competitive edge. Now, with these 12 linguistic patterns, I was able to go from 0 to 12.7K per month in only 73 days, bringing my ability to understand how to align the prospects so they close. So take notes. If you want results like that, if you want to scale from 10K to 50K, from 50K to 100K, and you don't already know these, then by all means, take notes and be elite. Pattern number 1 is mind reading. It's when a prospect states assumptions about other people's thoughts as if they're verified facts and truth. How to challenge it? How do you know? Did they ever explicitly tell you X? Answer usually no. The moment that person searches for evidence and finds none, the fact becomes an opinion that they thought was a fact. It then becomes an opinion, and then that creates an opening for you to expose and then reinforce your own belief to make them more receptive to change. An example is, people think I'm fat and lazy and I hate that. It's on a sales call, they're talking about their deep pain. Yeah, just people think like I'm fat and lazy and I hate that. A way to challenge that is, how do you know? Has anybody ever explicitly said that you're fat and that you're lazy? 9 out of 10 times they're gonna say, no, nobody's actually ever told me that. And that's where you go in and be like, well, okay, perception is projection. Have you ever heard of that saying before? No. Okay, well, that basically means that you don't know what other people think. They don't know what you're thinking. Therefore, if you're thinking about what they're thinking, it's generally your thoughts that you think about yourself. So is it fair to say that, no, they haven't explicitly told you, but you personally think that you're fat and lazy? Yeah, I guess that's fair to say. Now they're like, dang, I feel fat, I feel lazy. Which opens up realms for them because they know that they think about that way themselves, which opens up more deep pain and makes them actually own the pain instead of deflecting it onto others. All right, number 2, lost performative. It is when a prospect gives a value-based judgment or statement without taking ownership of the belief itself. When you restore the owner of the belief, the rule becomes an opinion, and opinions can be evaluated, weighed, and reframed, most importantly. An example of a lost performative is losing weight is hard or the program is expensive. The way that you can challenge that, losing weight is hard. According to who? I'm curious. Oh, can I pick something out? Like, according to who? Like, who? Losing weight is hard for who? And then they say, oh, like, I found it's hard. Okay, so you personally have found that losing weight is hard. And then they take ownership of it. It's not a universal law. Like, some people find losing weight easier than others. So you find it hard. Okay, do you know why you find it hard? Because you don't have enough emotional fuel, emotional driver. Doesn't it make most sense to have a conversation today about what's actually bothering you so we can make a change? Yes, cool, emotional. If they say this program is expensive, like, compared to who? Okay, well, there are people out there who are on their deathbed, and if they don't invest, they're actually gonna die. It's expensive compared to what? Like, compared to who, etc. They need to say, in my opinion, this program is expensive. In my opinion, losing weight is hard. Then they take ownership of the belief and the fact, then you can reframe it, making sure that it's not like a universal law. Once we isolate the fact that it's their thought, not a universal law, it breaks the grip on the belief, because they're almost making it normal in their brain, saying like, everybody thinks that way, but it's only them that thinks that way. All right, episode 3, universal quantifier. It is when a prospect uses absolute language. Always, never, everyone, nothing. These are very important. An example is when a prospect says everyone gains weight when they get older. The way that you can challenge that, and the reason why it's a red flag is because they normalize the problem. The way that we can challenge that is either repeating the absolute word with curiosity, always, everyone, or you can challenge it by saying, has there ever been a person who didn't gain weight as they got older? Yes. Okay, so it's not so much everyone, but more so like you've experienced that. Yeah, well, I mean, that's right. Like, I personally have gained weight as I've gotten older. Makes sense. Now their rule is weaker and they see it as a generalization, and there are exceptions. They can be the exception. So once that they've realized that it's a generalization, not an actual like law of the universe, now they can become the exception to the rule that they made up. Once the belief slash generalization is now shown to be false, they can't hide behind it anymore, and it has room for us to reframe. For example, people might say 19-year-olds on a sales call, they don't really close. Well, has there ever been a 19-year-old closer that actually makes $10,000 per month? Why don't you be that 19-year-old? That was me. Now I'm the most impressive 19-year-old you will ever meet. Welcome to episode 4. We're breaking down presupposition. A presupposition is a belief or assumption that is embedded inside of the structure of a sentence rather than stated directly. To understand or answer the sentence that they said, you're forced to accept the hidden assumption as true, often without noticing. Example, the prospect says, I'll start when life settles down. The presupposition is that life will eventually become calm enough for you to begin, / I need life to settle down in order to start. That's the presupposition. This is probably the most important pattern, if not one of, to challenge. Because when it's a presupposition, you can then be like, well, that presupposition doesn't actually apply. A way to challenge it, what makes you believe that life is going to settle down? Has life ever stayed calm for long enough in the past for you to keep the weight off? What if the real solution is learning to succeed while life is actually busy? Examples, and you get them in that corner. Now, another example is the prospect says, I don't have time to focus on myself. The presupposition is that taking care of yourself requires time that you don't have. An option to challenge that is it true that you have no time? Or does your health keep getting pushed behind everything else and you don't actually make the time yourself? Ownership. Next, are there things that you currently make time for despite being busy? I guarantee you there is. Look at their screen time. Next, what if improving your health gave you more energy and time instead of taking it away? Another one would be implementing your health and fitness, like having a routine. Not only give you more time, but it doesn't take any time at all because losing weight is a calorie deficit. Once you've exposed the presupposition, it gives room to reframe and then put them in that box in order to be successful. Episode number 5, nominalization. A nominalization is a process, which is a verb or an action that has been turned into a static noun, like turning something dynamic, moving, into an object. An example is, I need some time to make a decision. The nominalization is the decision. It's that decision. It's not the deciding process. They've turned it into decision. So they've turned the they've turned the active process of deciding into a static noun. Now, they've turned the active process of deciding into a static noun. One singular process. How to challenge it? What criteria needs to be measured in order for you to make that decision? What specifically do you think that you need to decide? Or what deciding process are you currently stepping into that needs to happen in order for you to make a decision? Because then you're breaking down their decision-making process, which then you can implement your own to make them successful. Another example is, I need my partner's approval. The normalization in that is approval. That turns the active process of approving into a static noun. The way that you can challenge that is, what specifically would your partner need to approve? From what we've covered today, what do you feel they wouldn't approve? What does the approval process look like, etc.? What does the approval process look like, for example? This isolates their belief and gives us room to specify, to chunk down, almost like a table, you chunk down the leg, and then when it falls over, you get to reframe. Episode number 6, welcome. We are talking about a simple deletion. A simple deletion happens when the prospect leaves out key information from their statement. They describe a concern, but they do not specify exactly what they mean, making the objection sound complete when more important details are actually missing. Makes it incomplete. For example, a prospect says the classic line, the default answer, I need to think about it. A simple deletion is, what specifically do they need to think about? The prospect has deleted the actual concern, question, or uncertainty, and they haven't specified what they genuinely need to think about. So the way that we can challenge it is, after getting tie downs, what's coming up for you that makes you want to think about it? Notice I didn't say the word need, because need implies they need to, but if I say want to, it gives it room for growth to not actually need to do it, but instead they want to do it, because it's not normal. Next, what specifically do you feel you still want to think about? What specifically? Oh, I don't know. Then there's nothing to think about. Which part of the decision still feels unresolved for you? If the program's going to work, if there's no reason it wouldn't work and you have the money to move forward, what is there to think about specifically that you want to think about in order to move forward? Oh, I just want to think about it. That's circular reasoning, and then we can implement a reframe there as well. Okay guys, so for episode 7, we're talking about the unspecified referential index. An unspecified referential index happens when the prospect refers to a person, a group or a thing without clearly identifying who or what they actually mean. They use words like they, people, someone, everyone, it, you, but the actual referent is missing. This creates vagueness and can hide the real source from the belief or of the belief or the objection. For example, people always gain the weight back. The unspecified referential index is which people specifically. The prospect has turned an undefined group into evidence for what will happen to them, externalizing it once again and not being genuinely specific. How to challenge it, which people gain weight specifically. Who do you know personally that regain the weight back after losing it specifically? This identifies the real source of the belief and gives us room to challenge whether it actually applies to them. And once they find proof of 2 people doing it in their entire life and they've just normalized it and adopted the belief, once we can find that, then we can implement a reframe. Episode 8 is cause and effect. Cause and effect happens when the prospect assumes that one thing automatically causes another. They speak as though an external event directly controls their emotions or their behavior, removing their own choices, their conscious choices from the process. Example, stress makes me overeat. The cause and effect pattern in there is the prospect is assuming that the feeling of stress or anxiety directly causes them to overeat. It forces their hand to pick up a donut and put it in their mouth. They automatically assume that subconsciously. The way that you can challenge it is, how specifically does feeling stressed cause you to overeat? Does stress make you eat, or is it eating that is the way that you currently respond to the feeling of stress? Consciously, that's what you do. Then like, yeah, you're right. Like when I feel stress, I tend to go to overeat. It doesn't make me overeat. It's what I do to cope with the stress. It's what I do. It's what's in my control, what I can change. Then when they have that ownership, they have more leverage to change, and they're not going to give you an I need to think about it objection because they're taking ownership. Another example is whenever work gets busy, I gain the weight back. Cause and effect is the prospect is assuming that work becoming busy directly causes them to stop following through. The way to challenge it is, how specifically does work getting busy cause you to gain weight? What do you start doing differently when work becomes busy? When you're busier, doesn't that make it easier to lose weight because you have less time to eat food, etc., etc., etc. Chunking down, getting rid of that limiting belief. This separates the external event from their response and helps them recognize where they still have choice and control, which they have every single time. If it's raining outside and I get wet, it's not the raining that made me wet, it's me not bringing an umbrella that made me wet. I was not prepared enough. I didn't do everything in my responsibility to prepare myself to not get wet by the rain. It's not the rain that specifically made me wet, it was me making the choice of me not being prepared. Episode 9 is complex equivalence. That's what happens when the prospect assumes that one thing means something else. They connect a behavior, event, or outcome to a deeper conclusion without providing the connection. An example is, the last program didn't work, this one probably won't either. The complex equivalence of that sentence is the last program failing means that this program will also fail. The prospect is treating 2 different situations as if they are equal and as though it will happen again. It's not right. How to challenge it is, how does the last program not working mean that this one won't work? It doesn't mean that, but like it's more likely. Okay, well, what was missing from the last program that made it harder to follow? Because all programs work when it comes to weight loss, but it comes to your specific discipline. Okay, cool. And even if that program didn't work, and then you can implement a reframe of, have you dated anyone in the past? Okay, but now you're married. Did you let that last person burn you? No. Cool. Another example is, if I need coaching, that means that I've failed to do it on my own, which is like a pride thing in their brain. Okay. Well, their complex equivalence is, getting support means that they've failed. The prospect has linked asking for help with weakness or failure. The way that you can challenge it is, how does getting coaching mean that you've failed? Could getting help mean that you're finally taking the problem seriously enough? This breaks the false connection and gives the prospect room to create a more useful meaning based on the event. A lot of men come on these calls and they're like, oh, I can just do it by myself. What makes you think that doing it by yourself is the best course of action? Complex equivalence. All right, so episode 10 is modal operator. It's what happens when the prospect uses words like must, should, can't, need to, or have to, as though a personal rule or limitation is an undeniable, unquestionable fact. This can hide who created the rule and opinion and the unquestionable facts and the consequence that they fear or what they believe is stopping them. For example, a bit complex. For example, I have to speak to my partner before I make a decision. The phrase have to presents speaking to their partner as a fixed requirement rather than a choice that they consciously make. So the way that we can chunk it down is, when you say have to, what makes you say that you have to? Finding an exception. Being like, okay, well, if your children were dying, would you have to talk to them about it? Or do you feel as though it would be important enough to do it? Okay, so you don't see your health as important enough to do it. Doesn't that make sense that that's why you've been stuck? Okay, cool. Makes sense. So we need to actually see your problem is big enough to make a change. Pain point, close. Next one is what would happen if you made the decision without speaking to them first? What specifically makes that conversation necessary before you can decide to move forward so that you can actually get to 150 pounds for the first time in 30 years so that you can play with your kids? Nothing makes that necessary. I just want to talk to her. Okay, so it's not completely necessary. Reframe there. Isolate, chunk down, reframe. It's great. Another example is I need to wait until life calms down before I start. The modal operator is I need to. It presents as waiting as a requirement rather than a conscious choice that they make. The way to challenge it is what would happen if you started before life calmed down? Then the reframe is what stops you from building a plan that works while life is busy so that you can actually lose the weight and keep it off. And it's like, well, that does make sense. Their modal operator was incorrect. Modal operator is very important. Even in your own language, I need to close this deal. Well, no, you don't need to. You're not going to die if you don't, but you get to, and you will close the deal. Act in complete congruence with the version of you that makes the most amount of money, impacts the most amount of life, and you need to lead these prospects in the deal. An unspecified verb happens when the prospect describes an action without explaining exactly how it happened. A lot of sentences have an unspecified verb. An example is, I've tried everything. The unspecified verb is tried. It doesn't explain what they actually did, how consistently they did it, or for how long. This needs to be challenged consistently throughout the course so that you train specificity. Because when you get specificity, you get data. When you get data, you can align them on the right path. And when you can align them on the right path, you can close the deal and change their life. How to challenge it? What specifically have you tried? How exactly did you follow those approaches? Did you do everything? Etc. The next example is the last program didn't work for me. The words work for doesn't explain what specifically failed and where the bottleneck was. You can challenge it by saying what specifically happened that made it not work, or how exactly were you expecting it to work that didn't actually follow through, that didn't happen. This recovers the missing context and helps separate vague conclusions from what actually happened. You need to be in complete congruence as a sales rep, especially for this, speaking in specific terms. If you jump on a call with your coach and you're like, yeah man, I just need to get better at sales. Just need to get better at sales is a minimizing word. Needing to get better at sales, there's the need word. And then there's also get better at sales that's super vague. A better sentence would be, my current bottleneck is logic phase, the part of the call where I haven't been able to, over the past few weeks, identify the specific bottleneck of the prospect and reframe it in order to get them in alignment. That is my specific bottleneck currently in this moment. I am here to get mentorship on that. You're gonna make so much more progress when you are specific. So be specific yourself, and then you can ask for specificity from your prospects. Episode 12 of Meta Model. This is the final episode, very exciting. Comparative deletion. The photo is really freaking cool. A comparative deletion happens when the prospect compares something without saying what they're comparing it to and by how much. They use words like better, worse, cheaper, harder, easier, more, less, too much, or too expensive. But they leave out the reference point. There's no specificity. An example is, it's too expensive. The comparative deletion of it is too expensive compared to what? That's how I would challenge it. The prospect hasn't identified the standard that they're using to judge the price. Too expensive compared to what? Probably a $57 fitness program that they bought 2 weeks ago, or 2 months ago, or 2 years ago. Too expensive compared to their life, to playing with their kids, to a car, like too expensive compared to what? A challenge that you can do is compared to what were you expecting to invest into your health and fitness so that you could lose 100 pounds, keep it off, live a happy, healthy life with your family? Another example is, I'm looking for something that suits me better. The comparative deletion is like, you're looking for something better than what, and better in which way. The way to challenge it is what would need to fit you better compared to what you've already tried before, or what we've discussed. And they're like, well, you've got the nutrition, you've got the training, you've got the accountability, you've got everything that I need. Like, shit, I don't know. I just want to look at other options. Okay, but what specifically have we not covered that you feel as though you need? Nothing. Okay, so we have everything that you do need. Yes. Okay, so doesn't it make more sense to get in a vehicle that you genuinely believe will get you to your goal? Commit now to you once and for all, knowing that this will work. There's no reason it wouldn't. And you have the investment to move forward. Doesn't it make more sense to actually step into alignment of the version of you that gets to 150 pounds? Yeah, it does. So what should we do? We should do it. Cool. Awesome. That was episode 12 of Meta Model. I hope that you guys enjoyed. Follow for the next series, which is going to be the Milton model. God bless. All the best. Hit the subscribe button.